On my wedding night, I hid under the bed to play a prank on my husband, but someone else walked into the room and put her phone on speaker. What I heard next froze my blood. The dusty floorboards pressed against my face as I lay flat on my stomach, trying to keep as still as possible. My wedding dress was a tangled mess beneath me, the delicate lace brushing against the hardwood floor. I held my breath, trying not to sneeze from the dust that seemed to settle everywhere, even in the corners of my mind. The room smelled faintly of expensive flowers and perfume, but all I could focus on was the pounding of my heart in my ears. This wasn't how I imagined my wedding night. I'd planned it all out, this elaborate prank to surprise Daniel. I wanted to see the look on his face when he walked into our bridal suite, ready to find me, his new wife, hiding under the bed, waiting to jump out at him. He would probably call out my name in that soft, confused voice I loved so much, Valerie, Val. And then I'd pop out from under the bed, probably looking like a wreck, but we'd both laugh, just us, no cameras, no family, no expectations. Just us, starting our happily ever after. But that's not how things went. The door creaked open, and I felt my muscles tense, ready to spring into action. The footsteps that followed weren't Daniel's. His steps were heavy, confident, those steps I could recognize in my sleep. These were sharp, staccato clicks, fast, almost urgent. Clack, clack, high heels, expensive ones. I froze. From the small gap between the duvet and the floor, I saw the unmistakable sight of silver designer stilettos, stopping directly in the middle of the room. I knew those shoes immediately. They were Brenda's. Yeah, Chenace, I'm in the suit now. Brenda's voice rang out, sharp and imperious. Did they leave yet? I felt the blood drain from my face, my heart thumping in my throat. What was happening? This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't even a prank anymore. My stomach twisted. What was Brenda doing in our bridal suite, and who was she talking to? Her voice continued, oblivious to the fact that I was lying right beneath her. Preston is downstairs, handling the final bill with the caterers. And the girl, well, who knows where she is, probably in the bathroom fixing her cheap makeup. Cheap makeup? My fingers curled into fists beneath the dress. I had spent hours on my makeup, trying to look my best for this night. I could feel the edges of the dress scratching against my skin as I lay there, powerless to move. Is it done? A small, almost childish voice asked. It was too faint to recognize. Brenda laughed, the sound dry and cruel. It's done. The ring's on the finger. The license is signed. We've got her locked down, and she has no idea. No idea. What were they talking about? My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. The voices grew louder as Brenda walked across the room, her heels clicking with each step, a constant reminder of the trap closing in around me. I barely heard the next part. The shock had me paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. Valerie is a simpleton, a country mouse. She thinks she hit the jackpot landing my son. She has no idea she's just a glorified placeholder. The room spun around me. My body turned to ice. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make them stop, but I was too stunned, too betrayed. I closed my eyes, pressing my hands against my mouth to stop the sob that was threatening to escape. How could they say that? How could they speak of me like I was some object, just a means to an end? But Brenda wasn't done. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she thought she was untouchable. She doesn't know about the condo, right? You've got it all figured out. If they divorce, she won't get a dime. We'll claim the condo in court. My condo? I'd bought it with my inheritance, but I'd let Daniel handle the transaction to make him feel like the provider, like the man of the house. It was in my name. It was mine. But now they thought they had a claim to it. She has no support system. Brenda continued, kicking off one of her shoes. I flinched, afraid it would land on me. Her father's some retired nobody living on a pension in Florida. She has no one. Once we take the assets, she'll be nothing. We'll make her life miserable until she leaves on her own. I couldn't breathe. My father. My family. They had no idea how deep this ran, how far back it all went. But what was worse, what hurt the most, was that Daniel was in on it. He'd been playing me this entire time. Brenda stopped pacing, and I felt her presence loom over me like a dark cloud. She crouched down beside the bed, her voice suddenly softer, as if speaking to herself. We'll make her life hell. She'll leave on her own, and we'll claim everything. The condo, the money, it's ours. He'll finally be free. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavier than the dress that still clung to my body. I didn't know how long I lay there, trembling with disbelief. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't even a misunderstanding. This was a heist. My life, my love, my marriage. It was all just a scheme to steal a piece of property. A soft sound broke the stillness, the click of Brenda's heels as she walked toward the bed. Her shadow loomed large in the small gap between the duvet and the floor. She crouched down, her breath shallow. I held my own, willing myself to stay as quiet as possible. Then I saw her hand reach out, brushing the floor. She picked up something, and I barely had time to process before she held it up to the light. My pearl earring. Cheap junk, she muttered, inspecting it with disdain before tossing it back onto the bedside table. She stood up and walked away, the sound of her heels echoing through the room like the ticking of a clock counting down to my next move. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Then the door handle turned and Preston walked in. "Mom," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty room. Brenda's tone shifted instantly, smooth and sweet. "In here, sweetheart." He came in, and I held my breath, praying that he would say something, anything, to defend me, to stand up for us. But instead he sighed and flopped onto the bed right above me. "Is she here?" he asked lazily. "No," Brenda said, the lie slipping from her lips as easily as it always had. "She's probably in the bathroom." My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but I couldn't move. I had to stay still. I had to hear it all. "Listen," Preston groaned. "We need to talk about the bank transfer before she gets back." The final nail in the coffin. The betrayal was complete. I couldn't move. I just lay there, pressing my face into the dusty floor, feeling the weight of the dress on top of me. I kept my eyes closed, not daring to open them. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest I was sure they could hear it. Brenda and Preston continued to talk above me, oblivious to my presence. I wanted to scream, to burst out from under the bed and confront them, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to be calm, to think. I had to gather my thoughts and make sense of what I had just overheard. They were talking about me like I wasn't even there, like I was just some pawn in their game. A glorified placeholder. The words echoed in my head over and over again until they were all I could hear. When Daniel had proposed to me, I'd been swept up in the romance of it all. I had believed in him. I had trusted him. But now, all I could think about was how I had been played from the very beginning. Everything we'd shared, all the laughter and the intimacy, seemed like a lie. My mind raced as I listened to their voices. I couldn't understand how I had missed all the signs. There were so many red flags, but I had ignored them. Brenda had always been cold, critical even, but I thought it was just her way. I thought it was normal. She had always been sharp-tongued, especially when it came to me. I thought it was just her trying to figure me out, to gauge if I was good enough for her son. I had chalked it up to her being a protective mother, but now I saw it for what it was: control. She'd never wanted me to have anything. And Daniel, he had played me. He had let me believe that I was the one he wanted. But the truth was worse than I could had ever imagined. He had wanted my money, my condo, my life, all of it. And all along, Brenda had been whispering in his ear, telling him how to manipulate me, how to get what they wanted without me ever suspecting. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, willing myself not to cry. There was no time for tears. Not yet. They had no idea what was coming. When Preston sighed and said, "We need to talk about the bank transfer before she gets back," I felt the air go cold around me. I had always been the one handling our finances. Daniel had always let me take care of the bills, the accounts, the transactions. I trusted him, the bigger picture, our future together. I never questioned him, never thought to double-check the accounts. But now, I felt a cold wave of dread settle over me. What had he done? What had they done? Brenda's voice cut through the air again, sharp and calculated. You've got everything figured out. She'll never suspect a thing. We'll claim the condo in court. The receipts will back up everything we need to prove that it was his money, not hers. The condo, my condo. The one I had purchased with my inheritance. I had let Daniel handle the transaction because I wanted him to feel like the provider, the one who was contributing. I had let him think that he was the one doing it for us. I had trusted him. Now, I realized that they had planned everything from the very beginning. They were going to take everything I had, and when they were done with me, they would toss me aside like I was nothing. I could hear Brenda pacing again, her heels clicking loudly as she walked back and forth in the room above me. I held my breath, afraid she might hear the sound of my heartbeat as it thundered in my ears. But I couldn't stop it. The panic was rising in my chest, clawing at me, but I pushed it down. I had to stay calm. I had to think. Brenda's next words sent a chill through my entire body. Once we take her assets, she'll have nothing left. She'll go back to whatever trailer park mentality she came from. And Preston will finally be free to marry someone with actual class. Someone like Kendra. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Kendra. The woman who had been at our wedding. The one with the tight red dress and the big smile. The one who had been with Daniel for years before me. The one who had always seemed to be just a little too comfortable around him. I had brushed it off, told myself she was just a friend, just someone from his past. But now I saw the truth. Kendra was more than that. She's practically an orphan, Brenda continued. Her father is a retired nobody, living on a pension in Florida. She has no family, no support system. Once we drain her assets, she'll be nothing, and then we'll have everything. The condo, the money, the life. I felt sick. I wanted to scream, to confront them right there. Not yet. I had to play my part. I had to act like I didn't know, like I was still the naive bride, the one who would forgive them. My body trembled as I lay under the bed, my hands pressed against the floor, trying to steady myself. I could feel the weight of my dress pressing into my ribs, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except what I was going to do next. Preston, Brenda said, her voice cutting through the silence. I think we've got her right where we want her. Yeah, I know, he replied, his voice muffled by the pillow. But we need to make sure everything is in place. We've got to move fast. Fast. The word echoed in my mind. They were already planning their next move, already preparing to tear my life apart. I had to stop them. I couldn't just lay here anymore. I had to do something. With one last, deep breath, I wiggled out from under the bed, trying to keep my movements as quiet as possible. I stood up, my heart still racing in my chest, and grabbed my phone. I couldn't confront them directly, not yet. But I could start gathering evidence. I could start building my case. I tapped the voice recorder app. The red line began to move across the screen. Talk, I thought coldly. Keep talking, you monsters. And they did. The following days felt like a blur of mechanical movements. Wake up, play the role of the knave bride, try not to show the cracks. My heart pounded every time I saw Daniel, and every time I saw Brenda, my stomach twisted. They had no idea I knew what they were up to. At least, I hoped they didn't. The hotel room felt suffocating. Every time Daniel smiled at me, I wanted to pull away. But I couldn't. I had to keep up the act. It was all a game now. My heart had turned into ice, but I couldn't show that. Not yet. Not until I had enough. Daniel acted as if everything were fine. The perfect husband. He kept telling me how beautiful the wedding had been, how lucky he was to have found me. He was so good at pretending. But I could see it now. I could see how he was calculating every word, every smile, every gesture to make sure I stayed unaware. I didn't believe him anymore. Not even for a second. I had to start digging. I couldn't wait for the perfect moment. There was no such thing. I had to make the moments myself. I began tracking everything, his phone calls, his texts, his movements. I noticed that he was always just a little too careful with his phone, always keeping it face down whenever we were together, always sliding it into his pocket a little too quickly when I walked into a room. The quiet alarm bells that had been ringing in the back of my mind for months now became deafening. One evening, when Daniel went out for a Business meeting. I took my chance. I slipped into his office while he was gone and started searching through his papers. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but the sheer need to know, to have something concrete, drove me. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the folders on his desk. That's when I found it, a stack of papers hidden beneath some receipts. The top one was a bank transfer form. My heart nearly stopped as I read the amount, $500,000. I quickly flipped to the next page. It was a transfer to an account in his name, but the destination was a company I didn't recognize. My stomach sank. This wasn't a payment for any services, not anything I could recognize. This wasn't just an ordinary transaction. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my hands steady as I grabbed my phone. I snapped a picture of the form, my mind racing. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I didn't know how much longer I could keep up this charade, but I had to get everything I could. I started to pull the papers back together when I heard the door creak open. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly shoved everything back into place as casually as I could, pretending nothing had happened. "Val," Daniel's voice called from the hallway. "Are you in here?" I froze. "Yeah, I was just." I paused, trying to sound natural, just checking the paperwork. Thought I could help out. I smiled, but I didn't believe it myself. The lie hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. Daniel stepped into the room and gave me a warm smile. That same smile he'd been giving me since the day we met. It was supposed to be comforting, but now it felt like a mask, like a way to keep me in the dark. "You're always so thorough, Val. You know I don't know how to keep track of all this stuff." I smiled back, but it was stiff, forced. "You're the one who handles all the important stuff, Daniel." The words felt like poison in my mouth, but I had to say them. I had to keep up the act. "So," he said, walking further into the room, "how's everything going? Settling in okay?" He didn't even seem to notice the tension in the air. Or maybe he did and he was just pretending like everything was fine. "Yeah," I said quickly, "just a little overwhelmed, I guess, with everything going on." He nodded, seemingly unaware that his very presence made me want to run, to escape. "It'll settle down, I promise," he said, walking over to where I stood. "Once we're back from our honeymoon, everything will calm down." The words seemed to hang in the air, a cruel reminder that everything had already changed. My perfect honeymoon wasn't going to be a dream, it was going to be a nightmare. I forced a smile, nodding. "I'm sure. Just need a little time to adjust." And then, just as casually as he had entered, Daniel leaned down to kiss me on the cheek. It was the same gesture he'd always made, but this time it felt empty, hollow. The kiss was just a kiss now, not a promise. As he pulled away, I looked him in the eyes, searching for any hint of guilt. But all I saw was that same smug, confident smile. He thought he had it all figured out. He thought I was still the fool he could control. But I wasn't that fool anymore. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the papers I'd found. I couldn't stop thinking about the lies, the deceit, and how far they were willing to go. I had been a pawn in their game. But now I was awake. Now, I was playing my own game. I had the proof, and I would use it, but I knew I had to be patient. I couldn't rush it. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew I had to act fast. The web they'd woven around me was tighter than I ever imagined, and the longer I stayed in it, the harder it would be to escape. I took a deep breath, staring at the ceiling, and whispered into the dark, "You're not going to win this, Daniel. Not this time." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I had some control over my life. The night after I found the bank transfer, Daniel seemed unusually attentive, too attentive. He asked about everything, how I was feeling, if I needed anything, if I wanted to go out for a drink, maybe go see a movie. He was trying too hard, and I knew it. He thought he was smooth, acting like everything was fine, like he hadn't just spent the past week plotting to take everything from me. But I played along. I had to. The more he pretended nothing was wrong, the easier it was for me to watch him, to learn more about what they were planning. I'd been keeping my distance emotionally, but it was getting harder. He wasn't the same person I'd married a few days ago. I could see it in his eyes, the coldness behind the smiles, the way his words never quite reached his eyes. He was acting as though nothing had changed, but everything had changed, and not just for me, for him too. I started taking mental notes of his habits. When he was on the phone, he was always careful to keep his back to me, always talking in low tones, as if I didn't already know what he was hiding. At first, I wasn't sure what he was doing. Maybe it was business, maybe just small talk. But I had a hunch it was something more. I decided to confront him, not directly, not yet, but I wanted to see how far he would go to cover his tracks. The next morning, I slipped into his study while he was in the shower, pretending to be casual as I skimmed through his files again. There was one in particular that caught my eye, a folder labeled Preston, with documents I hadn't seen before. My heart skipped a beat. I knew enough by now to understand what was going on. Preston was Daniel's brother, someone I had met once or twice, but never thought much of. They had a tense relationship, but nothing that seemed worth digging into. But now, I understood. Daniel had been sending money to his brother. A lot of money. I opened the folder, pulling out several bank statements. Each one had a large sum of money transferred to Preston's account. My stomach twisted. This wasn't normal. It wasn't a loan or an investment. This was money flowing from my accounts into his hands. I couldn't believe it. Every piece of evidence, every document I uncovered made the situation clearer. I was just a tool to them, someone to manipulate, someone to use for their gain. And Preston, he was part of it. He had always been part of it. But as I stood there, the full weight of what I was seeing hit me. Daniel had gone too far this time. This wasn't just about money. This was about control, about using me for everything I had, everything I'd built. I heard the door creak, and my heart skipped. I rushed to shove the papers back into the folder just as Daniel walked into the room. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice casual, but there was something in the way he said it that made me wary, like he was trying to sound innocent, trying to cover something up. "I was just looking for my book," I said, holding up a novel I'd bought weeks ago. It was the first thing I could grab to deflect his attention. "I thought I left it in here last night." "Ah, okay." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, we're supposed to be getting ready for the reception soon. You should probably finish up your makeup." I nodded, trying to play it cool. "I will. I just wanted a quiet moment." He lingered for a moment watching me, and then left, closing the door behind him. I waited, taking slow, deliberate breaths. I had to stay calm, but the anger was building up inside me, rising like a tide. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a plan to strip me of everything I held dear, everything that had once felt safe. The door clicked shut, and I let out a long, shuddering breath. I couldn't wait much longer. I needed answers. But the problem was I didn't want to know what was next. Part of me wanted to run, just walk away, pretend I didn't know. But another part of me, the part that had been silent for too long, was already planning what came next. I stood still for a moment, feeling the cool air from the open window wash over me. I was calm now, but inside a storm was brewing. It was time to confront him. That night, after a long, fake smile-filled dinner with his mother, I decided it was time to ask. I waited until the house was quiet, until the noise of their laughter had faded. Daniel went to the bathroom, and I followed. I waited, knowing this was my moment. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. I had to ask. He walked back into the bedroom, wiping his hands on a towel. "What's up?" he asked, looking confused by my serious tone. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady. "What's going on with you and Preston?" His face froze for a fraction of a second, but that was all I needed to see. His eyes darted, and I could feel the lie forming on the tip of his tongue. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Why would you ask that?" I wasn't sure how to respond, but I knew that his reaction told me everything. "Because I found the bank transfers," I said softly. "I know what you're doing." For a moment there was silence. The tension hung between us like an invisible thread. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't move. I'm not stupid, Daniel, I added, my voice hardening. I know everything. He finally looked at me, but the look in his eyes wasn't what I expected. There was no guilt, no remorse. There was only a flicker of something darker. I did it for us, he said, his voice flat. We're going to have everything, you'll see. Just trust me. Trust him. The words felt like poison now, every syllable a reminder of how far gone he was, how far he'd already fallen. I don't trust you, I said, my voice breaking the silence between us. And I'm done playing this game. Daniel's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't say anything. He knew he couldn't deny it anymore. The mask had fallen. And in that moment, I knew. It was time for me to take back control. I had the evidence now. I had the means to destroy them. But there was something I needed first, something I hadn't fully grasped until now. I needed to take back control, to take back everything they had stolen from me, piece by piece. The next day, I woke up early, my mind buzzing with all the things I needed to do. Daniel was still asleep beside me, the weight of his betrayal hanging in the air like a fog I couldn't shake. I didn't know how I was going to do this, how I was going to confront him, how I was going to take back what was mine, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to make my move, and I needed to be smart about it. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, trying not to disturb him. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and opened up the voice recording app again. The red line was already moving across the screen, the evidence growing with every passing moment. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I couldn't let it sit on my phone. I had to make sure it was safe, locked down, that they couldn't erase it. I dressed quickly, pulling on a pair of jeans and a loose sweater, trying to shake off the sense of dread that kept creeping up on me. As I stepped out of the hotel room and into the hallway, I couldn't help but notice how quiet everything was. The sounds of the city outside, muffled through the thick windows, seemed a world away from the suffocating atmosphere in that room. I needed air, I needed space, I needed to think. I took the elevator down to the lobby, walking out onto the street. The cool morning air felt like a slap to my face, a reminder that this was real. This wasn't some nightmare I was going to wake up from. This was my life now. I walked aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my head. The city felt empty, hollow, and for the first time, I realized that it wasn't the city that was empty, it was me. I had allowed myself to become so consumed by the idea of love, of building a life with Daniel, that I had overlooked the truth. The truth that was right in front of me. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending that I was just another pawn in their game. I had to take control. I took a deep breath and pulled my phone out again. I needed to contact my lawyer, Justine. She had been with me through everything, and I knew I could trust her. I tapped the screen, sending her a quick message. We need to talk. It's time. As I waited for her response, I felt the weight of everything I had been through crash down on me. The wedding, the lies, the betrayal, all of it. Justine's reply came quickly. I'll meet you in an hour. You know what you need to do. I nodded to myself, even though no one could see me. Yes, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I walked back to the hotel, my mind focused, my heart steady. When I got back to the room, Daniel was still asleep, his chest rising and falling in a rhythmic pattern that had once been comforting to me. Now, it was just another reminder of how far gone we were. I didn't even bother to wake him. I simply packed my things, leaving behind the dress I had worn the night before. It was too much of a symbol now, too much of a lie. I stood for a moment, looking at the empty bed. It was a strange feeling, leaving behind the place where I thought I'd start my life with Daniel. But that life didn't exist. Not anymore. I walked out of the room, my heels clicking against the floor as I left the hotel behind. The next step was already in motion. I had to go to the bank. I had to lock everything down, make sure they couldn't take anything from me. Not a single thing. I met Justine at a cafe an hour later. She was already sitting at a corner table, a laptop open in front of her, looking as professional as always. Talk to me, she said as I sat down across from her. I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone and showing her the evidence I had gathered. The bank transfers, the conversations between Brenda and Daniel, all of it. Justine's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents. They think they have you cornered, don't they? I nodded, trying to push back the fury that was bubbling up inside me. I don't know how long they've been planning this, but I won't let them win. She looked up at me, her expression steely. Good, let's make sure they don't. We spent the next few hours going over everything. Justine was the kind of lawyer who didn't miss a single detail. She showed me the best way to protect myself, to make sure that Daniel and Brenda couldn't manipulate their way into taking anything. We discussed strategies for gathering more evidence, for making sure that when it came time to confront them, I would have everything I needed. Don't worry about the condo, Justine said as she closed her laptop. We'll make sure that's legally locked down. We'll tie it up so tight they won't have a leg to stand on. I felt a strange sense of relief at her words. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in days, I felt like I had a fighting chance. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went to the bank, spoke to the manager about securing my assets, and made sure everything was in place to keep Daniel from claiming anything. I had been too trusting for too long, and now it was time to take back control. That night, when I returned to the hotel, Daniel was waiting for me. His expression softened when he saw me, but I could tell that something was off. He wasn't as confident as he had been. Val, he said, his voice low, where were you today? I didn't answer him right away. I wasn't sure how to, not with the truth hanging between us like an open wound. I was taking care of some things, I said finally, my voice even. He looked at me for a moment, studying my face. I wasn't sure if he was trying to read me, or if he was waiting for me to crack. Are you okay? He asked, his tone almost too soft. I stared at him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between us. I'm fine, I said finally. But I think it's time we talked about our future, about what comes next. And that was when I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes, the realization that he was losing control of the situation. It was my turn now, and I wasn't going to let him win. The silence between Daniel and me stretched out, thick and oppressive. He was sitting across from me, his fingers fidgeting nervously with the hem of his shirt. It was the first time I had seen him look so uncertain. The man who had always been confident, always in control, was now avoiding my gaze, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite place. I leaned back in the chair, folding my arms over my chest. So, I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. We need to talk about our future, don't we? Daniel looked up at me then, his eyes searching mine for any hint of what I was thinking. But I wasn't giving anything away. I had learned how to play the game. Val, he started, his voice strained, I know things haven't been perfect. But we're in this together. We can fix this. We can still make it work. His words were hollow, like a last-ditch attempt to salvage something he had already destroyed. I could hear the desperation in his voice, but I wasn't going to fall for it again. You know, I said slowly, watching him carefully. I used to believe that. I wanted to believe that everything would work out. But I'm done pretending. His eyes widened, the realization finally sinking in. He was starting to understand that I wasn't going to back down, that I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. Val, please, he pleaded, leaning forward, his tone almost pleading. You don't understand. It's not what you think. I was just trying to take care of us, for our future. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Just don't. You've been lying to me from the start. Everything, Daniel. Every single thing. His jaw clenched, and for a brief moment I saw something flash in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or fear. But he quickly masked it, putting that same charming smile back in place. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice dropping to a softer, more intimate tone. What do you think I've been doing? I love you, Val. I could see the words he wanted to say, the ones he thought would make everything better. But I wasn't falling for them. Not anymore. I know what you've been doing, Daniel. I said, my voice cold and sharp. I know about the money, the transfers, the condo. His face paled. What? What are you talking about? He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Val, you've got it all wrong. I didn't. Save it. I interrupted, cutting him off before he could continue. I know everything. I've seen the bank transfers, Daniel. I've heard the conversations. I know about Kendra. About how you've been planning to take everything from me. He froze. There was no more smile, no more pretense. Just a man caught in the lie he had built. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I leaned forward, my voice steady and controlled. You thought I didn't know, didn't you? You thought you could play me like a fool. But I'm done being your fool. I could see the panic start to rise in him, his eyes darting around, looking for a way out. But there was no escape this time. Val, please, he said, his voice trembling now. You have to believe me. I did this for us, for our future. For us. I repeated, my voice rising slightly. No, Daniel, you did it for you. You've been using me the entire time. And now, you're going to pay for it. The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were closing in around us. I had made my decision. There was no going back now. I had the power, the leverage, and I was going to use it. I stood up, my body shaking with the adrenaline that was coursing through me. You're done. And you'll never get away with it. Daniel stepped back, his face contorting with disbelief. Val, you can't. I held up my hand, silencing him. I can and I will. You've been a part of this plan from the start, and now you're going to watch it all fall apart. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and rage. You think you've won? He spat. You think you're the one in control here. You have no idea what you're dealing with. But I wasn't afraid anymore. His words didn't have the same weight they once did. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, I said, my voice calm and even. And I'm done with you. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the door I paused. Without looking back, I said, You'll regret underestimating me, Daniel. You'll regret it all. The door clicked shut behind me, and I didn't look back. I knew this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let him or his mother tear apart everything I had worked for. The fight had only just begun, but I was ready. And as I walked away, I felt a strange sense of power surge through me. I wasn't that naive girl anymore. I was someone who could take on the world and win. And I was going to make sure they all knew it. The hours leading up to the confrontation felt like days. I paced around the apartment, checking and rechecking my messages, running through scenarios in my head. Each time I saw Daniel's face, his twisted smile, and it only strengthened my resolve. He had no idea what was coming. I had everything I needed, the recordings, the bank statements, and Justine's legal strategies. But even with all the evidence in my hands, the real victory wouldn't come until Daniel and Brenda knew exactly how much power I had over them. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I was going to make them pay. The plan was simple: expose everything. But first, I needed to lure Daniel into a false sense of security. I needed him to think he could still manipulate me. That was the key. Let him think I was weak. Let him think I was still the woman he could control. And when he least expected it, I'd strike. The next day, Daniel acted like nothing had changed. He was still sweet, still charming. He kissed me good morning and asked if I wanted to go to breakfast, his usual smile in place. But the cracks were there if you looked closely. The tension in his shoulders, the way he wouldn't look me in the eye for too long, the nervousness in his movements, they all told me that deep down, he knew things were unraveling. He just didn't know how badly. I agreed to breakfast, keeping up the charade. We sat in a quiet cafe, the soft hum of conversation and clinking cups in the background. I could feel the weight of the lie between us, but I didn't let it show. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch until he finally broke it. So, Val, he said, his voice casual, too casual. I've been thinking, maybe we should head out of town for the weekend. Just the two of us. A little getaway. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Sounds nice, I said, though I felt nothing. Where did you have in mind? The beach, he said quickly, his eyes darting to the side. Somewhere quiet. We can relax, forget all the stress, you know. I smiled faintly, though I couldn't hide the bitterness that surged inside me. That sounds wonderful, I said, leaning forward slightly. But before we go anywhere, Daniel, we need to have a conversation. His face twitched, but he masked it quickly, giving me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. What about? I think it's time for us to be honest with each other, I said softly, my voice steady but laced with a hint of finality. We both know what's been going on. His smile faltered, and for a moment I thought I saw something like fear in his eyes. He quickly recovered, though brushing it off with a laugh. Val, what's this about? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, leaning back in my chair, my gaze never leaving his. I know about the money, Daniel. The condo. Kendra, I know everything. His face went pale. The color drained from his cheeks, and for the first time, he seemed truly rattled. Vial, he began, his voice tight. I don't know what you mean. You're mistaken. I shook my head slowly, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. I'm not mistaken. I've seen the bank transfers. I've heard your conversations. I know exactly what you've been planning. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to come up with an excuse, a way to get out of this, but there was nothing. The truth had caught him and he knew it. You've been using me, Daniel. I continued, my voice low but firm. You thought you could fool me, thought you could steal from me, manipulate me into giving you everything you wanted. But now the tables have turned. He opened his mouth again, but this time I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of it. I want you to listen carefully, I said, my voice cold and calculated. You're going to walk away from everything. No condo. No money. No access to anything of mine. I'm taking back control. Daniel stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, like he couldn't fathom the words coming out of my mouth. You can't do this, he said, his voice shaking. You don't understand. If you do this, it's over. You'll lose everything. Your name, your reputation, everything. I leaned forward again, locking eyes with him. You think I care about any of that anymore, I said, my voice sharp. What's more important to me now is making sure you never do this to anyone again. You thought you could break me, Daniel. You were wrong. The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of the future that was unfolding in front of him. His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat settling in. He was broken, but not in the way he had expected. I stood up from the table, not bothering to look back at him as I gathered my things. The silence in the cafe felt like a wall between us now. I had said everything that needed to be said. He was no longer in control. I'll give you one chance to walk away, I said, turning to face him one last time. You walk away now, and you can pretend this never happened. You stay, and I will take everything from you. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. I turned and walked out of the cafe, my heart pounding with adrenaline. The game was over, and I had won, but this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The months that followed were a blur of legal battles and the kind of meticulous planning I had never known I was capable of. I had reclaimed what was mine, my condo, my assets, and, most importantly, my peace of mind. But the damage Daniel and his mother had caused wasn't something that could be undone in a day. Each step of the way, I watched as they tried to claw their way back. They used every trick in the book, from manipulation to deceit, trying to convince everyone around them that I was the villain. It was a twisted, exhausting dance, but I had something they didn't control. It wasn't long before Daniel's charm began to wear off. He tried to reach out, of course. His messages were filled with remorse and pleas for forgiveness, but I wasn't foolish enough to fall for it again. His words meant nothing after the lies, the betrayal, the games. I had given him the chance to walk away with dignity, and he had chosen to lie, to steal, and to tear apart everything we had built together. That wasn't something you could come back from. Not with me, anyway. Then there was the legal side of it. Justine worked tirelessly, her expertise cutting through every one of Daniel's lies. She dug into his financials, exposing the fraud that he had been hiding for months. The embezzlement, the false invoices, and the money laundering, it was all there, laid out in black and white. It didn't take long before the police were involved, and soon after Daniel and Brenda found themselves on the wrong side of the law. I remember the day I received the news. Daniel was arrested. It was the moment I had been waiting for, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but there was no joy in seeing him behind bars. Instead, I felt numb. There was no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet, steady relief. Brenda didn't fare much better. She had tried to distance herself from the mess Daniel had created, but in the end, she was just as complicit. It was ironic, really. The woman who had tried so hard to tear me down was now struggling to pick up the pieces of her own shattered life. When the divorce papers were finally signed, it felt surreal. I was free, really free, for the first time in so long. No more lies, no more games. No more pretending to be something I wasn't just to make someone else feel comfortable. I had become someone else over the past few months. Someone stronger. Someone who wasn't afraid to fight for what was mine. But the hardest part was yet to come. 3 years passed since that fateful night. In that time, I built my life back up brick by brick. Titan construction had grown even more, and I had claimed my place at the top. I was no longer the woman hiding under the bed, but a CEO respected in the boardroom, feared by my competitors. I had poured myself into my work, building something lasting, something that wasn't dependent on anyone but myself. Marshall and I had also found our rhythm. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. He didn't care about my wealth or my status. He saw me for who I truly was. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to let go of the fear that had gripped me for so long. The fear that I was just a stepping stone, a trophy wife to be replaced once I no longer served a purpose. With Marshall, I was enough. Yet, no matter how far I had come, the past never seemed far behind. There were days when I caught myself checking the corners of rooms, expecting someone to jump out and reveal that everything was a lie. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. And then came the call from the prison. It had been years since I had heard from Daniel, and I had no intention of speaking with him. But when I saw his name on the caller ID, something shifted inside me. I had to know. When I arrived at the visitation room, I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought I had moved on, that I had healed. But seeing him there, gaunt and broken, brought all the old emotions flooding back. He looked different. The swagger, the cocky grin, it was all gone. In its place was a man who had been stripped of everything, a man who had lost it all, and for a moment I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "Val," he said, his voice raspy, "you look good." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between us. "I'm happy," I said quietly, "happier than I've ever been." He nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer. "I messed up, didn't I?" I didn't answer him right away. I didn't need to. He knew what he had done. We both knew. "I've been trying to make sense of all of it," he continued, his voice shaking now. "The lies, the betrayal. I'm sorry, Val. I don't know what else to say." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "It doesn't matter," I said softly. "What matters is that I learned from it, and I became stronger." The conversation drifted to other things. He spoke about regrets, about what might have been, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone so far removed from who I thought he was. It felt like a different lifetime. As I stood to leave, I glanced back at him one last time. He was sitting there broken, just as he should be. "I'm done with you, Daniel," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm not looking back." I walked out of the room, my heart steady, my resolve unshakable. I had faced my past, and now it was time to leave it behind. The world outside felt brighter, the air fresher. I had moved on. I was free. And for the first time in years, I knew that nothing could take that away from me. The past had been hard, but it had forged me into something stronger, something unstoppable. And now, I was ready for whatever came next. As I drove home that night, I realized how far I had come. From the woman who had hidden under a bed to the woman who had built an empire. And I wasn't done yet.